um, there was a reformation of the calendar, and it became Gregorian because of the Pope at that time. And so it went from a religious calendar, and I like to see it now like a corporate calendar, right? Because now we're all, this calendar kind of, it guides our thinking and structures our day for work and labor and school and all these other, aspects of modern society. So by looking at what we're calling here in this workshop, ancestral time counts, it's a different function to it, right? It was a way of counting time, but it had a different purpose, So hopefully sharing this, we can learn to appreciate, natural time counts. They could be from different parts of the world, Africa, Asia. In this case, I'm talking about some from Mexico, primarily central to southern Mexico. And, so I want to share this particular time count so we can see and appreciate these natural counts. I'm gonna share my screen with you for a moment, so we can go through a presentation I prepared. And so when we talk about a term, Anahuac, before European arrival, the word Anahuac, it only pertained to central Mexico here. It was like that valley of central Mexico was known as Anahuac. Nowadays, a lot of us that are enthusiasts or
24 people
or historians, we use the term Anahuac to describe what historians call Mesoamerica. So Mesoamerica it covers Mexico all the way to Central America, right? From Mexico to Central America, that's what our historians call Mesoamerica. And Meso, it means middle America. So like the America of the middle, right, of the continent. So like I said, I'll say it again, it includes Mexico and Central America. So I'll be using the term Anahuac, kind of referring to this geographical area. Now, in this geographical area of Anahuac, special time counts were invented that we don't see. We have our northern brothers here, above Mexico, right? There's northern groups, northern nations of natives, and they all had their own time counts. But it's very different than the time count that was kept from like Zacatecas all the way down to the Mayan areas, right, of Central America. And for example, there's a count called the Tonalpoali in Nahuatl. It's a 260-day count, 260-day time count. And this time count, you don't find it in South America, North America. You don't find it in any other part of the world, So that's telling that so it's like a cultural part of our cultural patrimony, as well as historical. And our ancestors, right, the inhabitants of Anahuac, they created sciences, right? They aligned cities astronomically. They developed like some of the most precise calendars. They invented writing systems. And I want to kind of talk about that because Europeans didn't invent a writing system, right? There's like some say argue three to five countries in the world, 3 to 5 peoples in the world that invented their own writing system. And our ancestors were amongst those. So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. We invented writing systems. Our ancestors invented a number system, which is another feat. Again, in Europe and Spain and in England, they never invented their own number system. And some of the other implements are agricultural. Like our ancestors, they built cities that floated in the middle of lakes, They built, gardens, that sustained, millions of people, hundreds of thousands, for example, in Central Mexico. Gardens that were floating known as chinampas. So their agricultural implements were also important because they were able to, provide sustenance to the population, to the populace. So here we're seeing that the inhabitants of Anahuac, of ancient Anahuac, they were very sophisticated, right? They were not savage-like. They were not, you know, simpletons, you know, in their thinking. Instead, they were persons that were critical, that were observers. I like to see them, I like to call our ancestors like natural scientists, earth scientists, you know. They became experts of the natural cycles around them, and they became experts of the cycles of the cosmos above them. And from these observations, from these keen observations, they developed calendar counts. So I want to like talk a little bit about time, right? So we have to like, I want to build on our background knowledge. What do we know about time today, right? Starting at the bottom, we know that we have hours, right, of the day. And we know, we say that 24 hours, they complete one day, right? One complete day. That's how we organize time today. Our days, we organize them, like we group them by 30s. And we say every time there's one of those groups, we call it a month, right? And our months, you know, these months, we organize them by groups of 12, and we call them years. And then the years that we live, you know, or the years of history, we clump them into like groups of 10, right? And we call those decades, you know? And like, for example, you know, what decade were you born in, you know? Oh, he's from the 70s, from the 60s, from the 80s, 90s. We use the decade system there. And then we take these decades and we group them by fives, and we call them half centuries. And these are like milestones, right, in history, you know? And then we organize, we get two groups of those half centuries, and we create what is a century. Now, it seems a little odd to talk about our time in this way, you know, like, okay, this many groups of this many groups of that, right? It's foreign to us because we don't think of time as that way. We just live it, right? We live the you know, the hours of the day, we live the months, we live, you know, we live years, but we're not thinking of it like in components like this. So when we look at our ancestral time counts, it had its own components. Now, the interesting thing about time is a cultural construct, right? So every people in the world, right? If you think about the ancient peoples of the world, they all had their notions of time, right? Their observations of it, their experience with it, and they organized it in a particular way, you know, in a way that was taught and conveyed from generation to generation, transgenerational information about what time was, or how it was organized for that matter. So our ancestors, they had a different model, right? So our ancestors, they broke the day down into four main parts as well, right? Like the sunrise, the midday, right? The sunset, and midnight, right? We had these four parts of the day that our ancestors would keep track of. And we organized our day into 20 hours. So we looked at it as today's times, it'd be like less hours, but longer, right? We would assume, right? We could do, you know, and when we organize our days in months, right? But not in months of 30. Our ancestors organized time by 20-day groups, right? So we could say they had, you know, our ancestors had like 20-day months. And the month in Nahuatl, we can call it Sempualilwi. Some people call it Mestli, like a lunation, right? But I think Sempualilwi is a little bit more descriptive. It actually means 20 days, right? And in a year, how many months did our ancestors, how did they organize the months? They organized it into 18 months, right? Since they're shorter months, they're shorter months, there's more months, right? We have like 30-day months, so we only have 12 months. But if we organize time into 18 months, that'd be 18 times 20 gives us 360. There's another count that complements the 360 count for those 5.25 days. That's called Nemontemi, right? Now, here we see that the she week, when we go through the she week, the year, we group years not in decades, but in groups of 13. Those were called Tlalpili. And then we would take those Tlalpili and organize them into 4 groups, and that would give us a Shumolpili. This is a 52-year count, 4 13s, right? 4 13s is a 52-year count. This is kind of like that half a century. If we want to kind of like make a connection between our understanding of time today and ancestral time. And then they would organize these 2 of these Shumolpili, 2 52s, right? And that will give me this is larger count, the Huehuetilisli, which is a 104-year bundle, right? Our ancestors saw the years as being tied. They would tie like reeds, for each year. So it's a 104-year bundle or tying of the years, Huehuetilisli. So right off the bat, we see that like the people of Anahuac, and this is, like I said, from Zacatecas down even to the Mayan, to Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, ¿verdad? So our ancestors organized time in this fashion. So Mesoamerican calendars or Nahuatl calendars were based on astronomical and natural phenomenon. And as a result, all of its aspects were defined by the personifications of such phenomenon. This is important. What's being said there is that based on observation, these time counts came about, right? And these observations that they were making of natural cycles, for example, the cycles of animals, the cycles of the plants, and looking above the cycles of the planets, the moon, Mars, Venus, constellations, and the sun, for example. These calendar counts come from those keen observations, right? And these personifications are mainly identified as gods, right, by Hispanic invaders and modern researchers, right? So our ancestors, like they had names of endearment or classifications of this natural phenomenon, and the Spaniards interpret that as being gods. But if I'm talking about Tlaloc, for example, which the official version of history or Western academe would say that Tlaloc is the god of rain, right? Now, but if we think about God from the Judeo-Christian viewpoint, it's typically like this has this mystical notion too, right? That requires faith, right? You have to be a believer in Judeo-Christian views, right? So, but when we're talking about Tlaloc, you don't have to be a believer because Tlaloc is a concept of rain. And the word Tlali that composes and Ocli that composes Tlaloc, Tlali is earth, and Ocli is a drink of the earth. So Tlaloc simply means like the drink or the fermented drink of the earth, which is the rain. Now, you don't need faith for that. You can walk out on a rainy day and you can experience it. You can observe it, right? So our ancestral understanding of this natural phenomenon was classified by names. Chalchihuitliqueh, like the earth's jade skirt, which is the ocean. Right? Tlaloc, the earth's fermented drink, the rain. So it was like a poetic way of like making reference to these natural forces, these natural elements. Some of them were astronomical elements like Tonatiuh, the sun. Tonatiuh means he who travels with heat, right? You don't need faith for that. You observe the sun, right? So this is like earth science and astronomy. And from the indigenous perspective, like these personifications of this natural phenomena, like Tlaloc, for example, and Tonatiuh that I'm giving you, we could call them Nahualtin, or like some information they call them regents or acompañantes, energías, energies, right, or tonali. In native, with our northern brothers of the continent, sometimes they call animal spirits, right? But I say they're not animal spirits. Our ancestors didn't have, like, some of them were animals, but there was other imagery that was used in the calendar counts, not just animals, right? So sometimes it was like a symbol of the sun, or a symbol of a lizard, a reptile, an animal, or a symbol of a natural element like water, or it could be a symbol of a man-made object like a house, right? So our ancestors used different symbols to identify their 20 days. And these 20 symbols, right, of the month, the 20 days of the month, each symbol was observed, right? So they knew they would extract virtues from each symbol. Like if we're observing the lizard, they would extract virtues from the lizard. So when persons were born in these counts, they were said to have these virtues that were based on observation of these natural occurrences around them. So we start seeing that the pre-Hispanic or the indigenous time counts, they weren't about gods, right? They're not dedicated to gods. Europeans or foreigners that couldn't understand our time counts classified this natural phenomenon as that, right? Tlaloc, Tonatiuh, oh, the god of the sun. Tlaloc, oh, the god of the rain. Huitzilopochtli, oh, the god of war. They had to throw God in front of everything. And by the way, Huitzilopochtli not even had nothing to do with war, right? So this is Western academe, right? This is Western academe based on European observations. So we get their perspective on time counts in our ancestral history. Now, I just want to make mention, like those 18 months I told you that our ancestors had, there's like between 10 to 14 different natural and astronomical phenomena that were personified, what they call gods, that were linked to these 18 months. And each day sign, each of the 20 day signs here in the next category, each of the 20 day signs of the month, each one had its own like natural phenomenon or astronomical phenomenon that was linked to it, right? The 13 days of our ancestors had 13-day weeks. In Spanish, we call them trecenas. And each trecena, they also had their own little concepts that were linked to it, right? There's the night, what they call the night had like 9 different natural phenomena linked to it. And the years, the way they counted time, there was a series of 7 natural phenomena that ran, So what I'm saying here, this is where the Westerners get the idea of, polytheism, many gods. The Aztecs, the Mayans, the Mexica, or however they call them in books, were polytheistic, had many gods, right? Their calendar was dedicated to the gods. Their rituals, as they call them, were dedicated to the gods. Everything was dedicated to the gods. But as I'm explaining here, this natural phenomena has nothing to do with gods. It has to do with what's observable on Earth and in the firmament, in the sky above us. That's our reference point. That was our ancestral reference point, nature and the cosmos. They weren't looking anywhere else. They weren't using their imagination to create calendar counts, for example. And I want to show you, like, the first month of the year is a Tlacawalo. And they dedicated that month to Tlaloc, right? As I was saying, the rain. So that month, there was a ceremony, there were ceremonies, there were community decorations, community officials that had the degree of Tlaloc, because there were also universities that, schools that you can graduate in specific specialties, right? So it was like a Tlaloc month of 20 days, right? Boom. The next month, like a Xipuhualisli, was dedicated to Xipe Totec. Xipe Totec is like the rebirth of nature, right? Plants die and then they're reborn the next day. I mean, the next year, the next season. Plants that are pruned, they grow new shoots, seeds germinate. That greenery that comes and goes on the earth, that can be a Xipe Totec, right? So it was dedicated to this concept. Now, notice that it has a human personification. It has a human form. Our ancestors drew it that way, right? As a human form, because it has that influence on us persons. And these are the images, like I was telling you, that Westerners or the first invaders of Anahuac call gods. They would say, this is the flayed skin, the god of the flayed skin, right? Something of the sort. That's what they call Xipe Totec. Very gory, by the way. And then the next month, Tosostontli was dedicated to Tlaloc again. Hey, wait a minute, but we saw Tlaloc previously. Well, guess what? Out of the 18 months of the year, the concept that was mostly celebrated was Tlaloc, right? And it makes me at least conclude of how important it was to our ancestors. A lot of abuelitos in Mexico, even in my current trips over there, they say, I've heard this many times throughout different regions of Mexico, in Central America, especially in the agricultural rural communities, they say el agua es la vida, right? Water is life, right? So it's no surprise to me that a lot of ceremonies, monthly ceremonies that were held were dedicated, most of them were dedicated to Tlaloc. And wait, Postostli, another ceremony, another month was dedicated to Centro, which is like the sustenance, the corn. Look at his headpiece, his headdress. Is the little corn right there, right? Now, I'm not going to go through all those. These are just like an example of the 18 months here. We have the 18 months from Atlacahualo running down all the way to Itzcali. The Montemi is like that other 5.25 time canal I was telling you about. But from Atlacahualo to Itzcali, those are the 18 months. And here on the right, we have the concepts that were dedicated. Now, look at all of these. This is what Europeans and Western academe, right? Western schools, Western thought, or the official version of history, they'll call all these concepts, they would call them gods, right? But they're all natural phenomena. Rain, the earth's rebirth, rain again, the earth's sustenance. Tezcatlipoca is like the time and space of the earth. Huitzilopochtli is the rising sun, you know. Tlaloc, Huitzilopochtli, that's like the salt, like the feminine aspect of the salt, right, that we eat. Chilonen, the tender corn. Huitzilopochtli, again, the southern hummingbird or the sun. Chutecutli, the cosmic heat. And we could go down the list and there's no God. There's all these natural phenomena, right, that our ancestors, acknowledged and revered. So when people say, what religion did the natives have of Anahuac? What religion? I say they had no religion. But if we have to like force their cosmovision into the term religion, I would say the religion was science, was observation, right? Was observing like the earth and the cosmos, like I've been mentioning. Now I want to show you examples of this. There's a codex. Some argue it's from Oaxaca. It's called the Codex Borgia or el Códice Borgia. Now this codex, some argue that it's from the Oaxaca Mixteco region. Others argue that it might be from the Tlaxcala region, right? There's this author, if you see the center here of the page, it says based on Susan Milbrath's Heaven and Earth in Ancient Mexico. So this researcher, she argues that the Codex Borgia is from Tlaxcala, kind of near Puebla, Oaxaca area. Now, what she did, she went into the ancient, she kind of like, she figured out what year this ancient book was made, during what year, like in the late 1400s, for example, right? And then she started looking at astronomy programs, like for example, Sky Map, that tell you how the sky was at particular dates. So this is like this program that exists where you can look at, like I can go back and see what was in the sky, like in the 1500s of a particular place in Mexico, right? You can see what planets were visible from Earth. So she goes to this program and she starts connecting the imagery and these ancient books to these astronomical observations. So I wanted to show that as an example of like why our time counts are natural time counts. Why I'm saying that they're natural time counts. Did they have a civic function in ancient times? Yeah, they had a civic function, right? Our ancestors had societies, they had cities, they had, they had court systems, they had marketplaces, doctors, and so the calendar did have a civic function as well, So I wanna share here some of these like slides. So here we see one of the slides. Now this border all around it, like this rectangular border around it, it's an interpretation of the Milky Way, right? Like the Milky Way, what they call our galaxy. When you look at the northeastern horizon, at certain times of the year, you could see what they call the Milky Way. It's like a serpent of stars, you know? That's why I just called it Mishkoat, which means like a serpent of stars, Mishkoat. They call it the Milky Way because they see it as like spilled milk. You see, like the stars are so dense in that area that they call it spilled milk, right? La Via Lactea, you know? And our ancestors decide as a star, as a serpent of stars. Now, Milbrath in her book, she went back to the year 1495, the 30th of December, and she noticed that Mercury was visible for the last time, right? And then she says that Venus was last visible during the evening, of January 2nd, right, of 1496. And this they call it an inferior conjunction. That's when Venus is between the Earth and the Sun, right? Now, she takes the central part, the central piece, and like this happens like 13 days later after the last phenomenon we're looking there. And it says that Venus or Quetzalcoatl on January 12th of 1496, in the eastern horizon, Venus is first visible as a morning star. So this is a sky map that she took, right? This is actual science, right? This one to the right is a picture of what you can see from Tlaxcala on this particular year, 1496, during December 1st. I mean, during from January December 1st to possibly January 12th. Like these are like what was observed in the horizon. Now you see this cloudy area up here. That's the Milky Way, right? That's the Milky Way, and then that bright star down here. That's planet Venus. So Venus is heading towards that Milky Way. As Venus is rising or appears to be rising, is gonna intersect this the Milky Way or this Mishkoat, right? And this is what she argues is presented here on this slide. If we look to the left, we see this representation of Mishkoat, and we see the central piece right here is Venus, right? It's Venus. One name for Venus is Quetzalcoatl, and Quetzal is precious, and Coat are twins. It could be a serpent. Coat is serpent, but a coat is also a twin, like cuates in Mexican Spanish. Un cuate is a twin, a gemelo. So in the center here, you see these two serpents, right? These two serpents, you see them right here. They're kind of like interlocked, and these are Quetzalcoatl. That's Venus, and Venus has two aspects. Sometimes we see it in the morning or in the evening, right? And here we see Venus rising, and it's about to cut through the Milky Way. Now, these are more observations of Venus. Here, Venus is linked to a dry season, right? But she documents that this is an image of a lunar eclipse right there, right? Down here as well, right? That's like, she's arguing that like these plates are showing in the sky, in the firmament, the nocturnal sky, that is a lunar eclipse. So she's looking at this ancient book that's dated to this particular time, and she's analyzing how the sky was at that particular time. So what is the premise? What is the premise of my argument? My premise is that our ancestors were not referring to gods in their calendar counts. This book right here, the Borgia, has a lot of calendar counts and astronomy counts. And so these images before might be seen like as a goddess right here, right? This is a goddess. But really, based on the observations of like these sky maps and when we're learning more about these books, this was an actual astronomical register that's documenting what's going on in the firmament, in the nocturnal sky at a particular time. So the ancient scribes, the ancient writers were creating these pages, right? This is an ancient book right here, written before the invasion of European arrival. That's why it's faded and it has water damage on the edges here. This is an ancient book, an ancient manuscript, right? So these ancient scribes, they weren't just drawing doodling little pictures of like gods and deities, you know, or goddesses, right? They were actually documenting astronomical occurrences, like eclipses, for example, like Venus traveling through the Milky Way, things of that nature, right? And these are time counts. These are astronomical time counts. Here's another one, plate 32 of the Codex Borgia. Down here, that's like a Venus, Quetzalcoatl little representation. She documents it as being Tlahuizcalpantecutli, which is Venus. Venus has matured and is emerging now from the Milky Way. So now it's going through it, right? It's coming out through it, you know. Sorry. And matured Venus is ready to cross the Milky Way on February 28th of 1496. So that star there is going to go through that Milky Way band, right? And in this Codex Borgia, it was documented in this particular way. So they're not just pictures, they're registers, right? These ancient books are registers. They're not ritual books for the gods. They're astronomical and natural registers. That's what our time counts are. There's a lot of things going on in this page. During the spring equinox, Venus representatives ascend to the platform to symbolize the planet's near maximum altitude. So all these concepts right here drawn on above, and right here at the top, we also see like the moon on this side with the little rabbit, like a rabbit representing the moon. And we see this deer, might not see it too well, but it represents the sun. And here we have we had the sky map down here to show us that Venus is here, and these are Venus representatives. We know because of the facial paint of those personifications here. When you have 5 dots, like on the face and the cheeks and in the nose, that those 5 dots, they represent Venus. So again, what appears to be pictures of gods are actually astronomical registers. And these are our ancestors. This is who we descend from. This is our lineage, our heritage, our cultural patrimony. This is our genetic lineage as well. Yeah, we have some invader bloodline as well, right? DNA. But I think it's so important to know the accomplishments of our ancestors, including ancestral time counts, because it kind of connects us to our environment, So we learn about these natural time counts, and we learn about the astronomy and how our ancestors classified them and named them, and and personified them. Then we live more harmoniously and more righteously, And since each day symbol, it has virtues, and when we follow the virtues of each day symbol, it's also polishing our character. It's creating our face, right? Ishli Yolo, our face and our heart. We want to be experts of that. Ishech Yolo, right? We want to develop face and heart, meaning we want to get refined. We want to be cultured. And our time counts is a way to do that, using our natural time counts. There's a lot going on this page. This is Mercury in the back of this, representing the back of what seems to be a building here, which we're looking at the sky. We have a crescent moon up here on the top, which I was bringing attention to earlier. And we see the sky map. This is an actual astronomy sky map. There was a crescent moon at that time, right? In the morning of the 11th of March, and this is what's going on. with Venus, and we're seeing all this imagery here. Again, the moon. We got Mercury. We got Mars, right up here, represented by that main flint, horizontal flint. And look at the codex. So you got Mars a little bit above, and almost like diagonal at the bottom, we have Mercury. And then if we look at the sky map, you have Mars up above, and almost diagonal towards the bottom, we have Mercury, you know? So like the positioning even, it matches the ancient books. And I mean, and it just keeps going, you know? It just keeps going. We got observations of Saturn there. We got Venus beginning his descent period. We got the moon waning, you know, getting smaller, right? And according to her, she's calling Saturn Yoaltecutli, right? Nahuatl, you know, so I thought that was interesting. Now, I'll tell you again, this research, some of this research, now this imagery here, I made this presentation. I made those information captions and things like that. I made the animation to present this information, but the information came from Susan Milbrad's book. And Susan Milbrad, she is a white researcher who, despite finding all this astronomy and all this planetary documentation in this book, she still calls them gods, right? So again, look at how intense and how the grasp of Western academe, right? Here's a researcher, she's looking at sky maps and she's making connections between these ancient manuscripts and the movements of the sky. And then she's still in her work as she's writing about it, she's calling them like this god of that, the god of that, the god of this, you know. So it's contradicting because she's showing how it's like a planetary register, and then she's calling it like these gods. But again, she's a Western researcher from Western academia, right? She has a certain outlook, certain perspective, right? A predetermined notion of our ancestral cosmovision, right? The predetermined notion is, well, they have many gods, they're polytheistic. So you're observing all this natural phenomenon and astronomical phenomenon, and you just classify it as gods. You know, it could be seen as academically irresponsible in that sense, you know? I would think as an investigator. We got Mercury. We got a solar zenith. The zenith is when the sun is right above the city in a particular geographic area, in a certain latitude of the earth, in a certain coordinate, and the sun is right above that. In Mexico City, for example, the zenith in Mexico City occurs July 26th. At least that's the second one. I think the first one's May 18th. It passes twice through that particular area. So July 26th, the sun is right above. Now here in this geographical area, apparently it was happening during May 9th of 1496. Now, I would say May 19th now, because this is 1496. That was before the Gregorian reform of the calendar. So it's probably still the Julian calendar at that time. So this is like, again, these are like, there's a solar position documented. So I think I'll end that presentation there. Just I think concluding with the idea that when we think of ancestral time counts, we thinking, sometimes when we think of like time counts, people are thinking like astrology, like horoscopes, right? And yeah, we could get our name. Like my name is Coscacuauli, and it comes from my birthday on this time count, right? And Coscacuauli is a vulture, the vulture symbol. Now, in Western thinking, the vulture is like, a scavenger. It has a lot of negative connotation. But in Central Mexico, the vulture was seen as a recycler of the earth, the one that took what was decaying and decomposing and turned it into energy, right? He had that function. It's a very clean bird. They live very long, so they have long longevity. Um, they have partners for life. Like when a vulture finds a mate, it makes it a lifelong partnership. So when we get these virtues and we apply them to the individual, right? So our ancestors will kind of get these traits, from this particular animal or this particular symbol, and it was said that the person might have those traits. Um, so I think it's important for us, to consider that the more we work with natural time count, I think we become humble, right? That's one part of it. But I was mentioning before, we refine ourselves, we check our attitudes or behaviors. We know about our tendencies and our virtues and our strengths. We learn all kinds of things. Today in the ancestral time count, it's four masat, four deer, right? And the deer symbol, it kind of like reminds us to be cautious, right? The deer likes liberty, right? So it talks to us about, maybe going out to open spaces, to protect our liberties, to be cautious in new situations or around new people. So, but it also tells us a deer is also light-footed, right? A deer is also, you know, very fast and it has solar associations with the sun. So it tells us to be astute, to be not just cautious like in a fearful way, but to be astute. So so this is an example of what traits we can work on today. So the traits for today would be that let's be astute, let's be cautious, let's be light-footed, let's illuminate like others' lives like the sun does. And we practice these traits during that day. So I think that's like the key factor to these ancient time counts. It's not just a horoscope to say like, oh, I'm compatible with this other person because this particular symbol, but rather is to link all of us to some natural phenomenon. I'm linked to some particular bird and other things because we get many symbols based on our birthdays, right? We have month, we have the year, we have that 13 group, the Calpulli, we have, it just, there's an array of ancient symbols that go with each of us, right? An array of like symbolism of like natural phenomenon, personifications of natural phenomenon, what Western academia would call gods, as I was saying before. So all these things like they influence us. So the more we know that, the more we practice, then we become harmonious, right? We become harmonious with ourselves and with our environment and with others, right? So it's and I went to a conference one time with some African brothers, and they invited Mayan people to talk about the Mayan count. I went talking about the Tonalpoali and the counts from Central Mexico, and there was some brothers from different parts of Africa, and they were introducing their time counts, all of them natural time counts, and they all had that function of like connecting us as humans in the scope of things. We're like in this earth and we're like in space, right? And it gives us like a reference point, to organize our time, right? And to understand the things around us. And Western academia calls our beliefs myths, right? They call them stories. They call our belief system legends, right? And there's an author, his name is Van Deloria. I think he wrote he wrote Red Earth, White Lies. Van Deloria, Red Earth, White Lies. And he makes an excellent point there. He says that Western academia uses numbers calculations, you know, sophisticated data to create a story. But nonetheless, it's a story, right? Nonetheless, it's a story. So they use that data, those numbers, to try to like sometimes invalidate native belief systems or native observations. But even let's think about the science community. Even they don't agree amongst themselves. Something the universe is expanding, something is contracting, something this, something that. You know, I mean, how did the dinosaurs die? Something it was a meteor, something it was a tsunami. You know, they got an array of like versions, right? So even their story is not concise. It's not, you know, solid. So, you know, I think we need to keep that in mind. You know, when we or others talk about indigenous, you know, knowledge, ancestral knowledge, I think let's watch that and not categorize it as like a story or a legend or, you know, some charismatic, you know, story or lesson, you know. There's a lot of observation that went into ancestral time counts. You know, there's a lot of science and a lot of critical, sophisticated thinking that went into these counts. A lot of calculations, a lot of documentation, a lot of registers that went into these time counts, you know. So it's not all mystical, it's not mystical, it's not, you know, we can call it spiritual, but it's not like that new age spirituality, you know, where, you know, oh, good vibes and, you know, things of the sort, right? This is like, this is based on natural science, you know, and astronomy. So, I don't know. Hey, Kali, I think I will conclude there.
Thank you so much, Witsi, for that very wonderful and enlightening presentation. Just to let everybody know, we do have the Codex Borgia here available at the Chuchas, if you're interested in connecting to that a little bit more. I also,
Hey, Kali, I don't know if someone was asking in the chat about the Ishkwameka or the headband I'm wearing.
Yeah. We'll open Q&A right now.
Okay.
But I really did at the beginning want to, as the Chuchas, acknowledge the Tatavian people and honor all indigenous peoples whose land we stand on. And I didn't get the chance to do that. And before we actually open up the Q&A, I wanted to pass it on to Alma, who is our current MSW intern here at the Chuchas, and let us know a little bit more about the surveys that we wanted to share with you. If you can do that before, we end. So I'll pass it on to Alma, and then we'll open Q&A. So feel free to put the questions in the chat, and then we can ask the questions to Maestro Witsi. If not, if you are comfortable, you can also feel free to unmute and ask the question directly. So actually, I'll pass it on to Alma, and then we'll go back to the question that we have in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Hello, everybody. I was having a bit of a technical difficulties. So you guys can hear me, right? Awesome.
Yes.
Okay, so as Melissa said, you know, I am currently the intern for the Chuchas. My focus is the outreach. And so before we proceed to questions and comments, I will be sharing a link in the chat that will take you to the questionnaire on today's event. We ask that you answer all questions. Questionnaire will remain anonymous, and it will help us evaluate the programs so that we can better them, improve them. We will remain in the Zoom session while you answer the questionnaire. And if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask me in the chat or directly. And as we said before, once we finish, we'll go to the questions and comments. So I'm gonna share that in the chat right now. Just 1 second, please. Okay, and it's there now.
Mhm.
So you really have the remaining time. I did want to open up the Q&A. So, but if you can please again fill out that survey before you log off of this session, that would be very helpful, and we would really appreciate that.
Do you want to give them like about 5 minutes before we proceed, or?
We can, I mean, we can do about 2 or 3. I think you might have to put up the link again.
Yeah, it was sent privately by accident, Alma. You could just make sure to send it to. There we go. All right, with that said, like Melissa had mentioned, feel free to put in questions in the chat or unmute yourself. Just make sure that you go ahead and mute yourself again once you're done so that we could hear everyone clearly. And yeah, whoever wants to take it away, or if someone, or if Wheaty wants to answer that question that someone had put in the chat earlier about the red.
Yeah, I saw that Amy Lime or Lime, I'm not sure how they pronounce it. I'm sorry about that. It's what's the symbolism behind wearing the red bandanas? I see a lot of danzantes wear them, but I was never taught why this is important. Now, well, each color has a direction, right? This is usually the direction of the west, of the sunset. And to our ancestors, the colors red and black, they represented like knowledge, right? What's written, academic knowledge. It could be, some see it as like natural knowledge as well. Now the headband in the back, it typically has two tips, right? And we have a particular knot. So in our cosmovision, we didn't have a notion of God, right? We don't have a notion of God. We have something that we call ometeot. And ome means two, and teot are like self-generating forces. So ometeot is like that dual energy, right? That generates life, that duality that's needed to procreate. So the knot represents that union of those dual forces, right? That generate life. And then the two bands that hang, the two strips, right? That's one's ometecutli, which is the masculine part of that duality. And then the other part represents omesiwak, the feminine aspect of that duality. So as simple as a headband is, it's wrapped around us and it puts pressure on our temples, right? And it puts pressure on our head, so it circulates our blood better, so we get clarity, better ideas, right? Because the blood is flowing to the mind. And then it has a symbolism of that union, that duality, that ometel, and the masculine and feminine parts of that. So yeah, that's the symbolism behind the headband.
I have a question.
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much. Presentation, so incredible. I'm of the thinking that part of our colonialism is that we include our history into the calendar that we've been colonized by. So the Julian calendar, the Greco calendar, right, that we go by now, where time starts with, or is punctuated with the birth and death of Christ, right? Why can't we, I think what I appreciate about your presentation and what I would like to know, is there a way that we can, instead of placing the encounter that happens on their calendar, why can't we place it within our calendar or calendar system here that stretches so much more further back into time than their calendar? And that in that way, because part of my understanding through Indigenous epistemology is that time functions in cycles, and whether we like it or not, things are going to change. And we will participate in that change because we are part of the forces of nature. But how can we understand, like what the Zapatistas have said, that this is one long night? And so then our future in part is dependent upon us being able to see ourselves in the future, but also dependent upon what kind of a world we want to build. And so I'm thinking that if we place these events, this moment of colonialism and destruction within a much longer understanding of time on our calendars, that could be a part of our decolonial process.
Yeah, I definitely think that learning your calendar count is a form of one of the forms that we could decolonize ourselves. You know, we could decolonize ourselves by using these time counts. Now, mind you, though, to implement it like on a global way or even international, it would be difficult, right? Because right now the Gregorian calendars was being used, you know, for those means.
But
now I think yeah.
what I'm saying, I just want to throw this in there so that you can include it in your response. Right now, like the Ummah, the Muslim community, they function off a different calendar.
Right.
Right? That's
right. You're right. Yeah.
Now we have a world where there are multiple calendars.
Oh, got you. Yeah. That's what I'm arguing for. You know, we need to have like even within Mexico, there were different regions and they had different calendar representations. They still had the 20 symbols, but some of them might be different symbols based on their region. You know, so I agree with you, sister, what you're saying, that perhaps how beautiful the world would be if everybody, all the peoples use their own natural time count, you know, to keep track of life, you know, through their own visual, historical, calendrical, you know, outlook, you know, their own cultural outlook, understand the world, and yeah, collaborate with others, share with others, compliment others, you know, but have your own reference point of view. I agree with that.
Because we have to decenter the Western calendar to rob epistemology of its power. Because the calendar in part controls our labor production.
Right.
Divided up like that to control our labor production. Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you, brother.
All right, sister.
We do have a question by Maritza.
Okay.
Which is, thank you so much for sharing. You mentioned that our ancestral time counts was shared as north as Zacatecas to El Salvador. Do you know what type of ancestral count was shared further north of the colonial borders?
Well, I'm not sure, because I know like each nation, they have like what they call their medicine wheels or little calendar wheels. And I'm really not an expert in their time counts, you know? So I think each nation had their own way of maintaining time, of keeping track, you know? But it wasn't like they didn't have, for example, 13-day weeks, which we call trecenas in the Tonalpoali, or Matlacli one, Ilwit, in Nahuatl. But you know, they have and had their own way of calculating time and understanding it. So I don't know what system they use, but they didn't. I know they didn't have our system from us down more down south, you know, like I said, Zacatecas and below. So it's a good question. I don't have like a precise answer for you. Something we'd have to investigate.
Thank you. We have Camila who's gonna ask a question.
Yeah, I'll ask it with my voice. So,
Yes.
what's up? Thank you so much. Such a gift. And all of the care that was put into the presentation is so clear. It's like really such a gift. Okay, my question is, so mi familia viene de Anáhuac. Yo ya vivo en Toronto. So I'm watching this from Toronto, Canada, where I live.
Okay.
And I am wondering, I'm also committed to indigenizing my life. And so I have this app on my phone that maybe some of you have heard of or know of, but it's the Tzokin, the Mayan Tzokin. It's called MCP Mayan Tzokin, and it's like the app, it's the calendar on my phone, and it's the Mayan calendar though, and it's really, really great, and it's one of those like tools that I use to continue to bring other culture and other perspectives into my life that are
Right.
from at least Mesoamerica space. But obviously, because when you're not on the land, you can't. It's like, how do you can't actually. You got to be on the land to get certain information. So I'm wondering if you have any recommendations of how to bring this calendar knowledge into your life in like a tangible, doable way when you can't necessarily be in community. If there's any like apps or tools or practices that you do to bring like ancestral time counts into your everyday life.
I mean, I keep track of my own of the count, right? On my own. I don't have a particular app, but I know Veronica Valadez. Veronica Valadez. I think she's on Instagram. I know she had a link that she shared once with me. I don't know where it's at this moment, but you can click on that link and it would tell you what the day was today, you know, and it was exactly like the count that I learned. I learned a correlation that I use is from Arturo Mesa Gutierrez. He's a historian in Mexico. And there are different correlations, you know, there's like the Alfonso Caso correlation. There's different correlations out there. And that means that not all of the authors of these correlations, you know, agree on like the starting point of the day of the day counts, right? So there might be different versions of it. Most of them would agree though on the count that like that there's 20 day symbols, there's 13-day weeks. I mean, the Tonalpoali, that's not in debate, right? So I use Arturo Mesa correlation. And like I said, that compañera Veronica Valadez, maybe you could hit her up about that link in Insta. She had the link that calculates according to that correlation. I think every neighborhood, this is like one of my opinions. I think this is kind of complicated to calculate names, right? You know, it takes a lot of research and a lot of reading and a lot of like, you know, talking to people to you know, gain and understand and be able to use these counts. So I think at least every neighborhood should have a few day counters, you know? I know I live in Pacoima, right in the San Fernando Valley. And I and some members of my Calpulli and a couple other representatives in the Northeast Valley, we know how to work these time counts, you know? It's not, you know, it's a, you know, good group of people in the Northeast Valley that know how to work these time counts, you know? We have people in Calpulli Tloqueh Nahuaqueh. We have some staff members at Tia Chuchas. We have Calpulli Temastia Quetzalcoatl, you know, Calpulli Xochillayo in Sun Valley, that we work these time counts, you know? So I think it's important to have that in the barrios, right? Have people like that in the barrios that can help calculate names for our youth, for our kids, for the warrior, for the cholito that's part of his culture. But, you know, maybe this is a means to bring them into the folds of the cultura and of his history, of his identity. So it's important to have these day counters. Singular, I would call myself a tonalpoqui, which is a day counter, but plural would be tonalpoqueh. So again, maybe investigate in your area, sister, or if you could come down to California, come to the Valley of San Fernando in the Northeast, and we're here. So
Tlazokamati.
yeah,
Thank you.
Kamitla.
We do have another question. I actually also shared on the chat. There's aztechknowledge.com, which is actually Masatin's cosmic clock, which is the majority is aligned with Arturo Mesa, the count that we're talking about. The next question we had was from Maritza Alvarez. Also, would you agree that the ancestral time count was also a common pan-indigenous language?
What do you mean by pan-indigenous language? Can you elaborate on that?
Hi, yeah, so basically what I mean is that there's these fundamental principles, right? And for the sake, let's say, for example, of trade among Southern and Northern tribes, the language that's most common is the ancestral time count because it's a tangible language connected to the land, material land. So I don't know, you just got me thinking about that possibility, you know?
Yeah. So I think there is some of that because time counts, you know, they are like a natural language, just like they say about music, right? It's like a universal language, right? That, you know, you feel it, you understand it. But I also want to be careful with that. And because I said earlier, I want to reiterate that each region had their own time counts, you know. Each region had their own time counts. So like if some Mexica, let's say somehow we can do this in the ancient times, a Mexica were to come to Tataviam territory, I doubt that the Tataviam would know the exact time count of like that the ancient Mexicans of Central Mexico used, you know. Now, but I think there's studies that have been done like on common like type signing, you know, language with the hands, where they have found that different nations, you know, so-called tribes or different nations, they had certain signs that were universal. You know, that became the universal language, you know, certain symbols, certain signs that they'd be able to do to communicate through. And then we also have what they call the lenguas francas, right? Like the languages that were most widespread. And in ancient times, before European arrival, the language Nahuatl, which was what the Mexicas or the Aztecs, so-called Aztecs spoke, Nahuatl was the most widespread indigenous language. So again, for commercial, for business, people that weren't even Nahuatl, they spoke Nahuatl because that was the language that they used to like you said, to trade, to interact, to make, you know, for just regular dealings of life.
Thank you. We have another question, Alejandra.
Hi, thank you so much. This is such an important time, and I'm really grateful for your research, your scholarship, and your willingness to share the knowledge. It's really, really appreciated. I have a question about, can you say more about the meaning of the 52-year and bundling that? And then also kind of what Camila referenced, like, how could we incorporate that into our daily lives? So this is a big year for me. I turned 52 on September 16th. So, and I just heard recently, like in the last few months, about the significance of it. So I'm just curious if you could say more about the bundling of the 52 years and then how to honor, celebrate rituals around it.
So the bundling of the 52 years, like for example, what you're experiencing this year, that means 52 years ago, you were born on a year 8 Tekpat. Right now we're in the year 8 Tekpat, 8 Flint. So you were born in the year 8 Flint. And our ancestors, the way I was taught, I understand that every 52 years, the cosmos and the movements, it completes a cycle of time. So saying like the stars and the planets, the way they are right now, that was happening like 52 years back. You know, so everything's like aligned to how it was during your day of birth. You know, the phenomenon of being born into the earth. You know, but there's something very important in the 52-year count. It's found like there's a researcher in UNAM. Her name is Maupome, Maupome from UNAM University, and she did some studies on, astronomy of ancient Mexico, and she found that the year count, that the 52-year count, it was correlated to the new fire ceremony, right? So in ancient times, they would extinguish all the flames of the whole community, and they had these special fire starters doing a ceremony like kindling a new fire. And then they had representatives that would take that fire in little torches to different parts of the community. So everyone in the community would be sharing the same fire. And this was done every 52 years. Now, astronomically, every 52 years, there's an alignment between the planet Venus, Earth, and the sun. That's called a conjunction. So there's inferior conjunctions happening during the 52-year cycle, which is when Venus is between the Earth and the sun. And then there's a superior conjunctions, an alternating 52-year bundle that has Venus on the other side of the sun. So it's Earth, Sun, Venus. So these conjunctions, these alignments, they occur every 52 years, according to this researcher, Maupome from UNAM University. So the next one would be, these ceremonies usually would happen like every 52 years. The next one would be like in the year 2027. In 2027, we're gonna have these conjunctions again, and that's when there would be a new fire ceremony. That'd be the time that our ancestors would have done it. So all the cultural practitioners of Mexico and the Southwest and Central America, it'd be good if we had a new fire ceremony during that time.
I have a question, if I may.
Yes.
Yes.
So you're saying in 2027 would be the new fire ceremony. Is there anybody alive today that would be alive to have lived 104 years that's very well versed in this information you're sharing with us? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I know, like, I don't know anyone that's like that old in the hundreds right now that works this, but like the maestro that I've worked with, Arturo Mesa Gutierrez, he's an elderly man. And I believe it was in the mid 70s when they had the last 52-year, ceremony. So, I mean, there's people that have knowledge that we can attain from or get more details. I know there's other maestros in Mexico, like Hecali mentioned here, or Senocoat and other teachers like that they might have like more historical knowledge of like this ceremony and maybe even hands-on knowledge, right? So we have to and if we don't have these maestros, we have a few years to learn how to make fire, We'll have 2 years to learn how to make fire from wood or reed and things of the sort, and have a fire starting ceremony. That'd be beautiful.
Gracias.
Yeah, Mitla. You're welcome.
Thank you. We have another question from Emmanuel.
805, Emmanuel, or what?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Buenas tardes. Can you hear me?
It's a little muffled, a little broken up, but I mean, let's see, let's try to make it work. What's your question, hermano, or your comment?
All right. Buenas tardes, saludos, relatives, all you guys. First and foremost, thank you, Tia Tuta, for opening up space for everyone. My question, I'm trying to stay connected. I feel I mentioned, I heard you mention that there's other Calpullis. I pertain to Calpulli Uchilini once.
I think you cut off, brother. I don't know if it's just on my end, but I do not hear you anymore. So if I understand what you were asking, hermano, I think you were saying you just moved to the valley, and I saw your comments that you came from the 805 area, from Itzili and Shoshi Calpulli, which I believe was Benjamin's Calpulli, Aparicio. So
Yes.
you're already
Yes.
a canal just by those measures. So in the valley, there's different groups. We have some that call themselves tradición, but they're really religious groups like Danzante, they dance for the Virgen de Guadalupe, for example, right? And then we have more cultural historical groups, right? In the Northeast Valley of San Fernando. We work like Mexicayo, La Mexicanidad, and we work more like the ancestral viewpoint or ceremonial reference of our events are based on more of the historical cultural aspect. And we do not do religious ceremonies. We don't syncretize the colonial and then the traditional like that. We don't, and it's not to offend anyone. It's not the intent here. It's not to, take credit or respect, from anyone else that does it that way. But there are groups in the valley that do it that way, that syncretize, that dance for the Virgenes and other Santos and Zapopan and all these other Virgenes. And then there's a few groups, the minority, that work from the cultural historical reference, from the Mexicanidad, from the Mexicayo. And those three groups, we got one in Silmar, Calpulli Tloqueh Nahuaqueh. They practice out of Tia Chuchas. And then we have another in Sun Valley called Xochiyayot, and they practice at a Sun Valley Park there. And then we have my Calpulli also, which is Tloqueh Nahuaqueh, and we work in Pocoima at a Humphrey Park. So, and I believe the other groups are either like a mix of what they call Tradición or Mexicayo or just straight Tradición groups, which I don't know. They took the term Tradición, but it's colonial Tradición colonial.
Hey, I'm getting bad reception. I'm constantly cutting off, but thank you. I'm next to follow up with you, hermano. I appreciate you doing what you're doing, brother.
Thank you, Kana. I appreciate your words.
Yes.
Thank you.
So once again, ahorita que at what time at Humphrey Park?
Fridays at 6. And we go on, a few hours into the night. I'll put it in the chat.
I appreciate you guys.
Also in the chat, we have the information to reach Calpulli Tloqueh Nahuaqueh. And yeah, also information for Calpulli Xochiyayot. Actually, feel free to email me, Melissa, at theachucha.org. And we have Witsi putting in the information for Calpulli Tloqueh Nahuaqueh. His email was actually also connected on the flyers to this event. But we can actually, if you can put in your email, Witsi, that would be great. So we are coming to the end of our presentation. Muchas gracias, Witsi, and pues all of Calpulli Tloqueh Nahuaqueh for the amazing work that you do. We were essentially, we were supposed to actually kind of host and work with Calpulli Tloqueh Nahuaqueh for their Atlacawalo ceremony, but it's exactly when the pandemic hit and all that got canceled. So here we are. So just a reminder, Witsi and Calpulli Tloqueh Nahuaqueh have one more workshop that's going to be coming up next Wednesday at 6 p.m. We're going to be sharing the link to sign up for that workshop soon. And that's going to be the function of Mexica Aztec Dance and really the evolution of danza and how it is that it came to be the way that it is today and its significance as well.
Hey, Kylie,
I
just want to contradict something. I think danza has not evolved. I think it has devolved, right? Because it used to be at its highest peak and it's just been devolving. So maybe we can start evolving this to head back towards the ancestral model of it.
Yes, let's begin that conversation.
So Wednesday we could start the combo.
Yes, Tlazokamati. So again, Tlazokamati, thank you. If you haven't signed up for that workshop, please do. If you haven't filled out that survey, we would really appreciate if you take these last couple minutes to do that. But we come to the end and hopefully we'll see you on Wednesday at 6 p.m. So, Tlazokamati.
Tlazokamati, Shanaria, have a great day.
If you ever feel, if you ever want to look back on this workshop, it will be posted on our YouTube channel in case you want to study up on the ancestral counts or what you heard today and what you learned. So find it there in a few days, okay? Thank you,
Boy.
everyone. Thank you, Witsi.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Tazo.